Hey, it's Lara. It is Wednesday, March 18th, 2020, and as per usual, I'm here with your weekly video, right? In these videos, I talk about the current astrology and how what's going on in the sky with the planets, in the cosmos, is directly related to what's happening here on Earth and how, one is a reflection of the other, as above, so below, right? So welcome. Thank you for being here. I want to start by saying I recorded this video a few times today. I actually posted it and took it down once, which I have never done before. So let's address the elephant in the room, shall we? I think that, we're all aware that there is... it's far from business as usual going on in the world right now. And before I even take that any further, I want to share two things with you today. So I put this t-shirt on this morning, right? It's an old one, but I've had it for a long time. You can probably read that. And I just went on a walk with my family out in the bush. We saw nobody, which was great, but we had to get out of the house for a little bit. And so I'm having my sparkling water in my koozie. I don't know if you can see it. I don't know if it's backward. No, it's backwards for me, not you, right? So it says, I don't sugarcoat shit. I'm not Willy Wonka. So those are my two messages for you today, right? And it's a bit of a double-edged sword. It's a bit of a paradox, and like all things, and that's kind of where we're at right now. So, and because that's sort of my approach to these videos, I want to deliver this information and insight to you with love and compassion and wisdom and all of that. But I'm also a truth teller, right? So that's my approach. So, the video itself, we're going to talk mostly about the upcoming new moon in Aries that's happening, because it is, it's the astrology. That's what I was going to talk about anyway. But it is so, of course, indicative of where we're at. And there are some messages for us and some insight and some lessons to be gleaned from what's going on around the time of the new moon that's coming up. I hope you're doing okay. I know I'm a little bit all over the map here, but I really hope that you're managing, wherever you are and with whatever's going on. I think the thing I really want to stress here is that, we're all in this together right now, right? That's the big message. I think that's the overarching lesson. And we're heading into some Aquarius energy with Saturn moving into Aquarius over the next couple of days. And, I think that's really telling in terms of future direction. Aquarius is about the group. It's about the collective, among other things. And so, and with Saturn moving in there, I spoke all about that in last week's video. Last week's video is relevant for now. It's relevant for the next, few years sort of thing. So if you didn't see that, then I encourage you to go back and watch it. But Saturn moving into Aquarius, we're getting a taste of this, the whole social distancing thing and the restrictions, the social restrictions and stuff that we're experiencing right now, right? So that's kind of giving us a taste of things to come, as I spoke in last week's video, or Saturn moving into Aquarius will give us a taste of that. But right now where we're at is trying to sort through the chaos, right? And trying to figure out the best approach, and really, realizing that the world is a lot smaller in some ways, perhaps, than we thought. Nobody, regardless of their their ethnicity, their gender orientation, their job title, their relationship status, their socioeconomic status, their political affiliations, their philosophical leanings, none of that. Nobody, regardless of any of that, none of that matters right now. None of us is immune. So it's sort of the great equalizer, right? This whole situation that's going on right now in terms of, obviously, I'm talking about the COVID-19 virus, right? Coronavirus, the global pandemic. But then there's another side to that. It's also showing us, right? As much as Aquarius is the sign of the group, it's also about the individual in relation to the group. And so we are seeing how, in fact, there are some people who are more vulnerable than others, and that we have a social responsibility to, look after those people, to care for them, to look out for them, to perhaps, sacrifice some things in order to, for the greater good, in a sense. And some people are struggling with that right now. Denial is quite powerful, right? And I understand that in some ways, because largely the reason that people go into a denial about things is it's out of fear, whether they acknowledge or recognize that or not. And so I think that's where a lot of people are at too. But what I was starting to say is that, it's pretty evident that some people are more vulnerable in this situation than others. And that is not only in terms of who is more susceptible to the actual virus, but who has the means to manage the fallout, right? So things like, not everybody has the means to go out and hoard toilet paper, for example. And some folks don't have the either the means, or like they have to go to work, whether that be because they're, directed to, legislated to, or they just feel like they there's no other way, kind of thing. Like there's lots of pieces at play here, right? But my point is that we're seeing not only how we are all in this together, but we are also seeing how the inequalities, right? It's shining a big light on the inequalities, I think, that exist. And so I think we're going to see more, we're going to see how that plays out. And there's a lot of realizations happening right now, on personal levels, but also on a grander scale, that it's going to take us a long time to work through and to resolve. So this is just the beginning, really. And on that note, we have the new moon in Aries, right? So tomorrow, on the 19th of March, we've got the sun moving into the sign of Aries, and it marks the equinox, the spring equinox here in the Northern Hemisphere where I'm at, when the sun hits 0 degrees Aries, which is the beginning of the zodiac. So we are starting a whole new cycle. It's the astrological new year. And, this is the beginning of a massive shift, a sea change, right? So, and astrologers have been talking about this for a long time in terms of the cycles that are playing out, the Saturn Pluto conjunction that took place in early January, the Saturn Jupiter conjunction that will be happening at the end of this year. So there are larger cycles and smaller cycles within that are going on. So we've got the equinox happening tomorrow. And I'll say happy birthday to those Aries sun signs out there. But this cycle, the beginning of this cycle is felt on a global scale, but then of course it's felt individually for each of us, right? So somewhere in our own individual chart, we have Aries. And wherever Aries sits for us, specifically 4 degrees Aries, because that's where the new moon is happening, is where we will experience this energy of the new moon personally, on a personal level. And on that note, if you are somebody that has planets, points around the 4 degrees Aries mark, give or take about 5 degrees on either side, or planets, points at that 4 degree-ish mark of the other cardinal signs, which are Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn, then this is a new moon that you will experience on a personal level, definitely. But all of us will feel it on a personal level to some degree, generally in relation to the house that the new moon is falling in, right? But because this is new moon in Aries, first sign of the zodiac, we're looking at sort of the natural zodiac here. And I did take note that, normally when I speak at the end of these videos to each sign, we go by rising sign, because in a general forecast, that's what you do. You go by the rising sign or the ascendant. That is, because I don't know unless I look directly at your specific birth chart where the sun is sitting for you, right? But I can know your rising sign, based on birth time. And so when we do these general forecasts, we can get a sense of what house falls, or what sign falls in which house for each rising sign, right? So you listen generally for your rising sign, but this is happening in Aries, and I took note, and I was considering, my own chart, and then the chart of friends and family members, and where their sun sign is. And I noticed that a lot of these themes that are playing out in this full moon, or in this new moon, in relation to this new moon, can also be seen in relation to the sun sign. So in this particular case, that may give you also some good insight. I always recommend that people listen for their rising sign, but also their sun and moon for added layers of information. But we're not there yet. There's some other things that I want to talk about before we go through the signs. I want to show you the chart right now first, before I go any further. So this is the chart for the new moon in Aries, which is happening March 24th, 5:28 a.m. That's Eastern time. You can adjust accordingly, at 4 degrees, right, of Aries. And so there is the moon and the sun at 4 degrees Aries, because a new moon is always when the sun and the moon come together in the sky to birth something new. And then we also have Chiron within 1 degree of this new moon, right, at 5 Aries, and Black Moon Lilith at 6 Aries. So this is a powerful pileup of energy within very close proximity to each other, right? Conjunct in the sign, the cardinal sign of Aries. And then in another cardinal sign, right? Cardinal signs are initiators, signs that mark the beginnings of the seasons and mark new beginnings. Another cardinal sign is Capricorn. And here, of course, we have Pluto still in Capricorn, sandwiched right now at the time of this new moon between Mars and Jupiter. And then we also have the south node at 3 degrees of Capricorn, and the north node down here at 3 degrees of Cancer, hitting, if I'm remembering correctly, hitting the eclipse points that happened, the last eclipses that happened there, the last eclipse that happened in late December of 2019. So what's going to happen in May, right, is the nodal axis, the nodes of the moon, they always travel in retrograde motion. So they are going to tip into Sagittarius and Gemini, mutable signs, in May. But right now, they're still in Cancer, Capricorn, and they are marking sort of the ending of the cycle. And we have Saturn, as I spoke about in last week's video, that by the time of this new moon will be right at 0 degrees Aquarius, but as I'm recording this, is still at the very, very later, very, very end of Capricorn. On the 21st, Saturn's going to move into Aquarius. So that's the ending of a cycle as well, right? And so we have this interplay between endings and beginnings going on right now in a huge way, and so we can, really, I think, sense that on a grander scale, and perhaps in our own personal experience that we're having right now, in these uncertain times, right? I want to, the other thing I want to show you, I'm just going to bring the chart up one more time, is that what's going on in terms of the new moon here, right? So moon, sun, Chiron and Lilith are squaring almost exactly the nodal axis, right? In Cancer and Capricorn. And a square is a conversation of tension. So let's talk about that piece. Let's talk about that piece first. And then I'm just going to say a word on the pileup of Jupiter, Pluto, and Mars in Capricorn. So I'm not going to talk too much about Saturn in Aquarius because I did last week, like I mentioned. So please, if you're interested in that piece, it's relevant to where we're at right now, and particularly relevant to where we're going. Listen to last week's video. But I want to talk about the moon in relation to the nodal axis right now. So the nodes of the moon, right? The north node and the south node. We all have these points in our chart. The nodes are always across the sky from each other. That's how they travel. And they have been traveling for the last, 18 months or so through the signs of Cancer and Capricorn, in relation to the eclipses, because that's when, the nodes factor into eclipses, right? So in relation to the eclipse cycle that's been happening, and also in relation to all of this Capricorn energy, right, that's been going on, that's been highlighted, whether by conjunction or opposition, Cancer or Capricorn, or Cancer opposite to that. And so we've got now this nodal axis in a square to the new moon that's coming in on March 24th. And so when this happens, it's like when something squares the nodes of the moon, it's like this sticking point on our trajectory. It's in this case, we're looking at the south node representing sort of where we've been, right? If you think about it being in the sign of Capricorn, which represents the establishment, it represents the hierarchy, and the institutions, and banks, government, this kind of thing. It represents tradition, and it also represents mastery and maturity and responsibility and ambition and achievement and all of those things. It is the sort of divine father energy. And I've spoken about Capricorn before, at its sort of best, Capricorn is about doing practical work with reverence, and like a true, master craftsman kind of thing. But so what's happening with the South Node there in Capricorn squaring this new moon is like, we are in this place of, having to let go in some ways of the past, right? The South Node represents the past. It represents where we've been and what we're really experienced in. It represents our comfort zone, even if it's not that comfortable. It represents what we need to release or let go of in order to move forward towards our North Node, which is the great unknown. But it's really what, is in our best interest. It is what we want to embrace. And it can be, that journey can be scary, but we get a sense that it's something that is meant, right? Is meant for us, sort of. So it's interesting to see how this new moon at the beginning of this cycle, this Aries, marking the new year, astrologically speaking, is squaring the nodes, past and future, right? So we're in this point, and with the moons squaring the nodes, we can kind of have this sense of a struggle, like I said, between the past and the future, and an emotional attachment to the past and to the way things were and to what we're used to the old ways, the old structures, the old traditions, all of that, right? The old ways of being. And so it can be difficult to move past that, and it can be quite emotional, emotional time right now for people. So be gentle with yourself, in that process and on that journey, and understand that we're all dealing with that in some way. And some of us are a little more hesitant to step into the unknown, right? And some of us are really kind of struggling with what the future is going to look like. Now, Aries is the sign whose keywords are I am, right? It's the sign of the warrior and the pioneer. It's the sign of, the one who is really sort of driven by instinct and is very self-oriented. Aries is. And so this new moon in Aries is kind of like the big question is, well, who am I, right? Who am I in relation to all that's going on right now? Who am I going to be when this is all said and done? Who do I want to be? Who do I want to be perceived as? All of these things, right? Are questions right now for us, big questions. And it can be scary to ponder those things. So the other piece I want to talk about is that we've got, like I said, Pluto sandwiched between Mars and Jupiter in Capricorn right now, all within 1 degree of each other. This is really intense transformation, right? The Saturn-Pluto conjunction that we had that was exact in early January showed us this, but we are still in that cycle. And now Jupiter's there, and now Mars is there, amplifying the whole thing, right? Jupiter is expansion, growth, and it is this search for meaning, It's a benefic planet, though, ultimately, which it's saying this is a challenging time, but there is some reason for optimism and for hope, right? So I think we need to keep that in mind. But it is intensely transformative time right now. There are elements of darkness and fear, which is Pluto. Elements of aggression, Mars, assertiveness, taking action, though, and acting on instinct, right? Mars. Elements of heroism happening as well with Mars and Jupiter to a degree too. And then and this transformation of the power structures and this kind of thing, right? And they're really probing the depths and the purging the toxicity and all of this. That's the Pluto piece. There is a war in some ways going on between, different philosophies right now, very indicative of this combination of energy. Pockets of optimism, pockets of, truth and truth seeking, and morality in the darkness as well. So all of those things are going on. There's so many other things I could talk about. Mercury is in Pisces right now, right? Back in Pisces. And so we see this theme of what's true, what's false, trying to weed through the fog of information. And nobody really knows what's going on, right? Also, Neptune in Pisces, very much reflecting this lack of boundaries and the spread of this virus. We've got, what else can I talk about? Oh, I think that, one of the things I was going to mention, and I don't know if I said this when I was talking about just this notion of realizing a lot of things during this time and probably in the weeks and months to come. But, in terms of the inequality, I think we're seeing that, and we're going to see more of this with Saturn in Aquarius, and then eventually, Jupiter entering Aquarius as well. And there will be a conjunction, right, between Saturn and Jupiter at the end of this year. And then, that will amplify that. But I think we're going to see more of focus on technology, on innovation, on those kinds of things. And the fact that through this, we may come to realize that access to technology can no longer be considered a luxury, right? It is something that we should all have access to. And so that is one way where we see kind of the haves and the have-nots, right? Where we see the people that have the means to, connect with others, even though they can't do so physically, have the means to have access to information, have access to entertainment and those kinds of things, right? We're seeing all kinds of free concerts online and all this stuff. And those people that don't have the means to access that because they don't have the technology, whether for whatever reason, because they live remotely, because they can't afford it, because there are governmental restrictions in some parts of the world, like whatever the case may be, or because workplaces have not evolved quickly enough for people to have the means to bring their job home. There's all kinds of factors there, but I think that we're going to see, this is going to be a big theme moving forward. So, and something that comes out of this experience. Just before I go through the signs, I want to mention to you, the moon is currently in Capricorn. Tomorrow she's moving into Aquarius. And then into Pisces on Saturday and Aries on Tuesday, where we'll have the new moon. I mentioned on Facebook, if you're following the moon's path, right, which you can kind of learn how to do that if you download my free guide to working with the moon, which is the link is below. You can head over to my website and get that. But it's quite interesting because it is reflective of how the story is playing out on the day-to-day. So I just wanted to mention that to you. All right, so I'm going to move through the signs now and address where this new moon is happening, keeping in mind that this is a new beginning, right, in some area for each of us, but it's not without its challenges. New beginnings, as I said, are preceded by endings, right? And so that's kind of where we're at. And we have to, I think, embrace this new beginning with the spirit of Aries, right? Aries at its best, the brave warrior. You know, the sort of the pioneer, to boldly go, sort of, you know, kind of thing, into this brave new world, right? We are, I often use the term brave souls to refer to the people that, you know, resonate with me. I have a lot of Aries in my chart. My North Node is in Aries. My Chiron is in Aries, even though I'm a Pisces sun and a Virgo rising. But so this energy of, you know, being sort of brave and afraid, you know, the brave warrior, the pioneer, I resonate with that. And I use that term brave souls to reflect that, right? And so I think this new moon is about brave souls stepping into the unknown, you know, brave souls in a brave new world kind of thing. So I'll leave you with that. And now I'll go through each sign. And again, listen for your rising sign, your sun and your moon. And hopefully this gives you a bit of insight into where this is playing out in your chart, in your life, you know, what life themes will be triggered. And then, you know, also keeping in mind all of the things I just spoke about in the introduction. So we'll begin with Aries, because Aries, this is your new moon, right? And so it's playing out in your first house. And so that is in relation to I am, as I was saying, right? That's your catchphrase, if you will. And so this is all about who you are, Aries, and how you present yourself in the world, and how you approach the world, and how you are perceived by the world. And it is about who your physical vitality and your physical body, and you know, sort of how people see you. And so the new moon is a big new beginning for you in that way, right? Literally, who am I out in the world? So you are kind of you know, leading the pack here in this in relation to this new moon energy, with the new moon in your first house. So that's for you, Aries. Moving on next, where we have Taurus and the new moon happening in your 12th house. So for you, Taurus, this is about a new beginning, you know, endings and beginnings in the 12th house, which has to do with endings, among other things. It also has to do with what goes on in isolation, behind closed doors, in solitude, in reflection, in rest and recovery. It has to do with self-sabotage, right? And how we might, you know, unhealthy escapism, potentially. It also has to do with the dream world and the spirit world and our spiritual health and connections. And it has to do on a more practical level with those places that we consider closed off from the world or behind closed doors, right? So hospitals, hospices, spiritual retreat centers, rehabilitation facilities, spiritual retreat. I don't know if I said that already. Centers. I think I just did. You know, all of those kinds of things. Prisons. So that's where the new moon is happening for you. And those themes are what's being triggered, right? And of course, in in relation to the pieces I spoke about in the introduction. Next, we have Gemini, where the new moon's happening in your 11th house. So this is a new beginning, preceded by some endings, or sort of blended with some endings there, in relation to friendship groups, clubs, associations, networking, your hopes and dreams for the future. This can have to do with even online networking. It has to do with the people that are walking the same path as you and how they can help you achieve, gain, sort of. And so those are the themes that are being triggered for you, Gemini. And, Gemini rising, Gemini sun, and Gemini moon. And then please do have a listen to the introduction so you have the full picture. Next, we have Cancer. Cancer, the new moon in Aries is happening in your 10th house of your public reputation and persona, of your status, of your career, and of your relationship to authority, including your own authority. And it also has to do with the legacy, the public sort of legacy you wish to leave. And so for you, those themes are what's being triggered at the time of this new moon, right? The new beginnings have something to do with those themes on a personal level. And then the other pieces are all at play as well. So that's for you for Cancer rising and sun and moon. Moving on to Leo, we've got the new moon happening in your 9th house, Leo. So the 9th house has to do with our worldview, right? And our belief system and our philosophy. And it has to do with higher learning and potentially, like college, university, that kind of thing, but any kind of learning we do sort of beyond the basics. It has to do with foreign travel and long distance people and places and foreign cultures, and what we can learn. It can have to do with armchair travel even as well. So all of those themes, are what's being triggered for you in terms of the new moon coming up. And there is this call to be, to embrace the Aries quality there of the brave warrior. So that's for you. Moving on now to Virgo. Virgo, this new moon in Aries is playing out in your 8th house. So the 8th house is, those themes of 8th house are being triggered. And those themes are vulnerability. It's about your intimate connections and relationships and bearing your soul, sort of thing. And the resources that you share, right, with other people. So that can be income from a spouse, that can be, debt, taxes, insurance, mortgage, wills, inheritance, this kind of thing. It can have to do, the 8th house is a very psychological house as well, right? It has to do with our deep psyche and, themes of wounding and healing in relation to that. So there's a new cycle, and it has to do with hidden knowledge, the occult, which just means hidden knowledge. There is a new cycle beginning there for you with this Aries new moon, and it is in relation, if those other pieces that I spoke about in the intro factor in. All right, next moving on to Libra, where we've got the new moon playing out in your 7th house, Libra. And the 7th house is your house of one-to-one personal relationships, right? Whether that be close, friendships, business associates, marriage partners or significant other, anything like that, close family members. The 7th house also speaks to contracts and agreements and contractual obligations. And it has to do with rivals as well. And so, these themes are what this new moon is triggering for you, and some new start there, the beginning of a new cycle. But again, reminding you that with beginnings, endings usually precede new beginnings, right? So that's what's going on for you. And then next we have Scorpio. Scorpio, for you, the new moon is happening in your 6th house. So this is the house that speaks to, our daily habits and routines, the daily grind, checking off the ticky boxes kind of thing. It speaks to our health and wellness and anything involving that, right? It could even speak to work that we do in that arena of health and wellness and how we are in service. It can have to do with pets as well, the 6th house. And it can have to do with those relationships between, unequals. So an example of that I tend to give is employee-employer kind of relationships. So some new beginning there happening for you. But as I keep saying, before new beginnings happen, endings tend to occur, right? So that's what's going on for all of us. And you can hear, the other factors at play if you listen to the intro. Next, we have Sagittarius, where we've got the new moon happening, Sag, in your 5th house. So the 5th house speaks to anything we create, our creative projects, our creative self-expression, how we shine our light. It has to do with children, whether they be our own children, issues around children or birth, or conception, children we work with. It has to do with what sparks joy for us and what brings us pleasure in general, right? So new beginnings happening in that arena for you. But first we have, some sort of endings as well that are it's all kind of this mixed up soup, right? That's going on right now. So that's what's going on for you, Sag. And moving next to Capricorn, where we have the new moon happening in your 4th house of your roots, your foundation, your home, your family, your place of living, real estate, your emotional security. And so for you, Capricorn, those themes are being triggered, right? Maybe one or some or all of those themes are being triggered for you at the time of this new moon. It's an opportunity for a big new start in some way, but it's not without its challenges. And I think you're no stranger to challenges at this point, Cap, with everything that's been going on for you, right, in your sign. So that's where that's happening for you. And then next we're going to move to Aquarius. And Aquarius, you've got the new moon happening in your 3rd house. So your 3rd house, Aquarius, the themes of the 3rd house are things like our siblings, our cousins, our neighbors, our community members, our teammates, our immediate environment, and communications, right? So that involves things like, it can involve technology. It can involve media and commerce. It can involve short commutes and messages exchanged back and forth on the day-to-day. And the 3rd house also speaks to early learning. So that's like, learning the basics kind of thing, the 101. It has to do with, early childhood education, or elementary education kind of thing. So all those themes are what's being triggered for you. Something in that life area is what's being triggered for you at the time of this new moon, Aquarius. And, you've also got Saturn moving into your sign. So I really encourage you to listen to last week's video for insight on that. Next, last but not least, I guess, we've got Pisces, right? Pisces, for you, the new moon is happening in your 2nd house. So this new beginning is happening here in relation to your own personal resources, your money, your time, your energy, what you value, what you place importance on, and, worth and your self-worth. And so, and your sort of material security. And so for you, Pisces, there's a big new beginning on offer here. And you're getting a sense of, who am I, like I said in the beginning, in relation to those themes. So, but we know that, before new beginnings, there are usually endings that precede that. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. So listen to the intro though, for all the, the other information that's relevant, to us and what's going on right now. So that is all the signs, the new moon in Aries. And, hopefully I addressed a little bit about what's going on right now with our current, world situation. And I hope this brings you a little bit of insight and comfort and context and meaning and all of that. And, I'm looking for other ways to do more of that, as I mentioned in the video that I did a couple of weeks ago, that one-off video, right, where I was telling you a little bit about my own story and that kind of thing. So I'll leave you with that. Take good care. Please feel free to connect with me via email or on Facebook or in the comments here below, on Instagram. The links to all that stuff is below, or always below this video. And I will talk to you next Wednesday. All right. Take good care. Bye-bye.